You know, pastors want men to lead, but often the complication is training them to lead in an environment without a lot of structure. Most men are accustomed to working within structures, but in a nonprofit setting, there's often not a lot of structure and more freedom than leaders are familiar with having. Given this, pastors and directors give their men's ministry small group leaders a long leash, but often find that this is counterproductive for some, and only a few survive. What these leaders need is not just more leadership experience, but a little bit of structure to get going. And as a man who has led hundreds of groups in my ministry career, there is nothing more challenging than coaching a men's small group leader in an environment where you will never see the dynamic. I would even have trouble calling this coaching because most coaches, for example, see their dynamics unfold and make adjustments along the way. For a men's leader in a small group experience, we may never see events occur. And when we do attend their meeting, men will be on their best behavior. And this is what makes a men's group and leadership a messy experience. Several years ago, we invited Heather Zempel, a small group expert, to come to speak to our leaders. She authored a book entitled Community is Messy, and she stated, discipleship is a whole life journey, not an 8-week class. It is a process of becoming, not a destination, and this is always messy. But just because groups are messy and different in every situation, this does not mean that we shouldn't have a leadership approach that will help us lead the men in our group toward greater success. Here are a few tips that I believe help men have a little bit of framework for their role as a leader and a facilitator of a group. Rule 1, spend more time asking over telling. I believe the best leaders in a group setting are not those with all the answers. They are those who ask the best questions. For reference, you may want to spend time counting how many times Jesus asked questions. He asked a lot of them. And even when people asked him questions, he often returned a question with another question. For example, take the rich young ruler who asked, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus could have just answered the question, but rather he answered back with, "What is written in the law?" And this is the role of a great leader. Even when you know the answer, you need to hold back. This is one of the hardest things to teach leaders who have a passion for teaching. And if you ever need a fail-safe question, I have told all our leaders to use the question, just say more. Say more. This is my favorite go-to question when men offer short answers to a question, because it turns the anecdotal comment or answer into a deeper personal sharing moment. Rule 2, catch men doing things right. You know, nothing will get your group moving in a more positive direction quicker than encouraging and complimenting men when they engage in behaviors that you want. While we may be tempted to tell the group what to do, it is better when men do impromptu actions and you reward them publicly for the behavior. For example, "Thanks, John, for being so transparent. I know that was probably difficult to share." That comment right there goes a long way. Or how about this? "Bob, way to go on bringing donuts and coffee this morning. Can someone else do that next week?" Or my favorite, "Man, everyone was early today. Thanks for being on time." Catching men doing things right creates a growing group dynamic in a small group setting. Rule 3, focus on relationships, not just the material. This is often the forgotten rule for those who gather men. We must remember it's okay to postpone a lesson or to truncate the material. Yes, you can do that, and no one's going to punish you if you don't get all the way through something in the time that you were given. Sometimes you might even need to modify a group meeting. It's okay to eat breakfast together or to go bowling or hunting or golfing, which we all love, to build deeper relationships in a different context. You see, relationships are important to the meeting, along with a shared path of discovering life together with God. Rule 4, be curious about everything. You know, a great men's leader is naturally curious about people, things, and life in general. Men want to know other men in the group, So let them share prayer requests in the group time. Have men share about the challenges that they're facing at work, home, and with children. Welcome men in the group to share testimonies of their life. The more men share personally, and not just the facts and opinions about life, they grow in relationship and in depth. So be curious, a little like an investigator. Rule 5, keep the big picture in mind. You know, great small group leaders keep the big picture in mind while working on the details. For some, this is a challenge because we get caught up in a lesson or a point or an illustration that we just cannot wait to make. Leaders need to lift their heads sometimes and remember that the men in our group need direction and understanding of both why we're doing something and where we are on a path of getting there. These are just a few rules for your men's leaders to keep in mind. These have helped me greatly over the years and are ones that I have embraced for myself in every group meeting. They are broad enough that they work in almost any type of group I've ever led. And while I could have included a dozen more principles, these are the ones on the top of my list because they are the pet peeves I dislike the most in poorly led small group experiences. Notice the contrasted pet peeves now that I have about poorly led small groups. Leaders that teach the whole time versus those that spend more time asking over telling. Leaders that talk down to men versus those that catch men doing things right. Leaders that only care about the material versus focusing on relationships. Leaders that are not curious about me versus those who are curious about everything. And leaders that don't guide me through the lesson versus those that keep the big picture in mind. These are just a few of my pet peeves mixed together with some principles that I've learned over time, and I hope that you'll use them well as you lead your men.